Again, I want to thank you all for joining us, and we want to welcome you to this program on FIDIC contracts and their management. Now, when it comes to the FIDIC contracts, the way I've seen since I've been associated with various contracts, when I was a chairperson, when I was a director in the UN and in the private sector as well, we did a lot of projects in Iraq, we did in many countries around, in Africa, India also. So I had done both type of contracts, standard contract and FIDIC contracts. I'm sure most of you will be doing both of them depending on the complexity, depending on the value, and depending on who is the funding body. If funding is coming from world bodies like World Bank, International, ADB or something, then certainly they want FIDIC to be used. But then there are other bodies which are local bodies around, it may have different. So you have two types of standard, one is standard contract, one is a FIDIC contract. So anyway, this is the one we are trying to say that FIDIC contract, the way I understand, is a very globally recognized standard. Anything you're doing internationally. So I think this comes into the place. Now, this is very popular for construction, infrastructure, engineering projects, turnkey projects. So what we will do it around in this program, I've tried to add something extra is everybody's talking of AI. If time permits, I can certainly spend more on that. But certainly AI is becoming in a very important way. AI can enhance the contract management and project execution. You know very well any contracts running in 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, multiple activities are there around. Many stakeholders are there around. Multiple milestones are there. To manage them is not easy thing. AI can certainly chip in. AI can certainly chip in making even the contract for you based on the FIDIC guidelines. So this is where I'll try to give you some flavor later when I get my own session. Now, the key objective, what we call around the FIDIC contract, is a robust framework. As I said to you, it's a globally recognized standard, which is a cornerstone of successful delivery of the worldwide for project deliveries. So project delivery, we want no risk at all. We want no cost increase. That's what the objective is. So with this background, now let me start. Everybody is there, I hope. So what I plan to do in this one, I'll set the stone, and then I'll ask each one of you to introduce yourself, and then tell us what are you expecting from this. Then later on, me and my colleague S.N. Panigiri will try to see how we can incorporate those objectives around. Now, when I talk of the FIDIC contracts around, these were developed just to giving historically. I know many of you will be knowing, maybe duplication for some of you, but I think just to set the tone, it was developed, again, I'm not getting into the French ones, internationally recognized standard form of contract used in construction engineering. You could call the FIDIC stands for International Federation of Consulting Engineers. In French also, the terminology is there. Now, these contracts are known for their balance, very clear around. They have been in this business for many years, since 1913. Clarity of the contracts, adaptability, and making them a preferred choice for project across the globe. Any international project, particularly of high values, people straight jump into the FIDIC. FIDIC contracts are indispensable tools for managing construction engineering project, I would say. Their adaptability, their acceptance, and focus on fairness. The fairness means what is the role, responsibility of each stakeholders. I think they are very, very clear, very detailed, I would call it around. It is a globally recognized organization. It was set up in 1913, founded by 3 countries, Belgium, France, and Switzerland. That's how the name came in the beginning. FIDIC is all in the French. But now around 100 countries are members of this around. The headquarters is based in Geneva. So this gives you some idea about the background of the FIDIC. The purpose, if I look around, the main thing is to standardize. If I'm sitting in Iraq, I'm sitting in India, I'm sitting in US, I'm sitting in Europe, each one says, guys, my terms and conditions. I think most of us who have worked for their own countries, they know very well. They'll say, my terms and conditions are like this. Even the same story we had in the World Bank, we had in the UN, that we have our own terms and conditions for goods, services, civil works, and consulting. They were okay up to some amount, but when the contracts become very high values and the vendor is from other countries around, They say, guys, no, I don't understand this. Let's follow standard one. Then the FIDIC comes into the picture. So standardization is a major, I would say, focus on this. Fair risk allocations around. So the responsibility and the roles and the risk taking between the parties very fairly spelled it out, whether you are doing a turnkey project, whether you are doing triple P, depending on what contract you are following up. Transparencies. It promotes clarity in the governance part. Even how to avoid the risk around, how to manage the issues around, they're all very well clarified. Dispute management. If dispute happens, how this will be handled around. That is also there in all the contracts around. Global applicabilities around, as I said to you, it's a global standard. Now, what is FIDIC known for? First thing is standard. Second is best practices, global reach, 100 countries around which are using it. And then come advocacy and training. Now, when I talk of a standard contract, why I'm again putting it up, I know your focus is on FIDIC, but still each one should know the normal standard contract which we do around is less than $1 million. But the ones if the value is very high and international, funding is coming internationally, like even in the World Bank, even in the Asian Development Bank, if it's a small values, we try to use the World Bank standards around on goods, services, civil works. When it comes to the high values, then we go for the FIDIC ones. So project values, less than $1 million, it's a rough estimate around, but if it's a very complex, it could be even 50,000. So it's 500,000. So something like that. The FIDIC is $5 to $10 million. Complexities are low, then yes, we go with the standard contract. If there's a high technical, logical complexities around, you're creating a tunnel. Complexity is too much. You need a very good defined standard around. You're doing a highway, long highways, and this certainly has complexities around. Low risk, high risk. So wherever you have a high risk around, then you go with the FIDIC contract. The clarity in the clauses are very high. I know Mr. Panigri will go through with you all the clauses around. So high risk is certainly I'll go with the FIDIC contract. Local projects, still people don't go into the FIDIC, they go within the country. The vendor is local, everything is local. Then we go with standard contract. But if it's a cross-border and projects in multiple jurisdictions, then certainly we go with the FIDIC one. Short term, less than 12 months, long term. So this is where I thought, let me set the tone around because most of you are dealing with both. Some are you dealing with the FIDIC contracts. Some cases where the funding is coming from abroad is all FIDIC. If the vendor is from abroad, maybe or may not be FIDIC contract, but otherwise standard contract. Now, why they are important around, I think to some extent, I've already said to you, the global acceptance. It's flexible. Now, each of these contracts are given by the color concepts around. And the color is a symbolic thing. So don't worry about that angle around. Some are red book, some are yellow book, but each one specializes in something. Like when I say about the silver book, turnkey ones. So you have all these, I'm carrying this since I used to practice all of them in the past. So these books are color-wise symbolic, but color means if I say red book, means I'm talking of FIDIC contract for construction. So like this, you can, so there is a red book, there's a yellow book, there's a silver book, green book, gold book, blue book, pink book, and emerald color also there. I'll give you some clarity on the later on this. Promotes fairness, alignment with industry practices around, supports sustainable development. The very first contract which FIDIC made was for consulting. In 1913, the very first standard was for only consulting services. Later on, over the time, the next one, which became very popular, was the red one. And after red, they came with all this. So red color is only a symbolic thing, but they basically tell you which application they are. Now, uses in private sectors, why they are used in the private sector, the FIDIC contracts, large-scale industrial commercial projects. So then in those situations, private companies adopt FIDIC contracts for energy plants, industrial facilities around, mining projects, where clear risk allocation happens around. So anything of the cross-border projects, turnkey projects, have been associated with Reliance also on some of the activities of theirs. So when they give a contract to outside companies in Texas and this, those are normally against the private sector in India, they follow FDIC contracts around. Energy, oil refineries, all of them, they use preferably this one. Renewable energy plants, no hydrogen plant with Total and this, industrials, mining. So mining activities also, if you're doing in X country or Y countries, like for lithium, some are doing in other countries, some are doing here, but the mining companies, some are abroad, then we do this one around. The key distinction between public and private sectors, again, infrastructure development for public benefit, commercial, then MDBs. Public sector is all MDBs, funding sources, multilateral development banks, government budgets, are public fund. Private sector is obviously their own. Preferred FDIC, red book, pink book, yellow book. So the pink book is typically for multilateral development banks, World Bank, Asian Development Bank, African Development Bank, even European Development Bank. So the red book is the one which will be going into very detailed, and Mr. Panigiri will go through all the clauses with you. Then in the private sector, we use more on the silver book. I want a turnkey, I want a yellow ones. So I want a gold book around. So there are different practices around. Transparency requirement. Then come the complexity part around. The top sector where FDIC contracts are used, I would say, infrastructure, certainly. Roads, bridges, railways, ports. We try to prefer this one because the clarity is much more. Energy part, water supply and sanitation, industrial projects, urban development. So this is where we're talking of smart cities and those projects. Then FDIC contracts do come into the pictures around. Now, what you need to know is it provides a framework. It's basically a framework for managing construction and engineering projects. It defines the roles and responsibility of the parties involved. So you might be an employer, you may be an engineer, you may be a contract manager, you may be a project manager, whatever a role you may have, it tries to provide you the roles and responsibilities around. There are standard forms of contract. Then the books are there, as I said to you. If I say the red book, and that is purely for construction part, yellow book, design and build. And then we have silver book for turnkey projects, green book for low value contracts around. And then low value could be 500,000, could be $1 million, depends on case to case. So this is, we try to use instead of 30 pages of the terms and conditions, I may have a smaller version around. So blue book, again, when I'm doing the tunneling work, orange book, gold book normally we use for the public procurement partnership projects around, like highways we're doing or some other activities. White book is again for consulting, and pink book is all the multilateral development bank. Now, these are the terms and conditions. If I had to say about the contracts, whether it's a standard contract or a FDIC contract, they are terms and conditions. And terms and condition means they are general conditions and rights and obligation, scope of work around, time, quality, payment, risk, health, safety, dispute, and sustainability. So sustainability also has been incorporated in the now new changes around. So this is where we're talking about, they are basically terms and conditions. So terms, I can change it depending on the risk. Our conditions, sometimes they say, I know this is set in stone. This is one I think already I covered around integrating AI into FDIC. So I'll take a few more minutes before I give the floor to you guys. Now, when we talk of AI now, AI is everywhere. And particularly I see in this one much more. Involves complex processes around. Effective planning has to be done. If I'm making a big highways, a big airports, or setting up a big even a metro station from one place to another, the activities involved are very high. How do I manage them? What is the impact of one activity on other one? If one is delayed, how does it affect the other one? So those processes are very cumbersome and take time consuming. So for planning purpose, for monitoring purpose, for compliance purpose, and even for dispute, I think this is where this can help us. AI can play a significant role in these areas. Efficiency part, accuracy part, and decision making. We will cover an overview of the role and uses of AI in FIDIC contracts. So when I come to the project management and implementation, I'll try to give you some flavor where we can do AI part of it, because we are regularly doing AI role, even the regular training we are doing on AI for our procurement activity. Role of AI in FIDIC contracts, very transformative, addressing critical areas. What does it cover? The risk management. If I have got the profile of a supplier, and I know this supplier is going through the financial situation, this supplier is going through some legal situation, you and me may not keep a track of it. AI will know exactly what is happening around and give me the tinkle, guys, you're going to have a risk with the delivery. So this is where I think on the risk management, this can help us a lot. Compliance part also, this can help us a lot. In short, if I had to say, AI brings more transparency. I know there's a negative side also, but positive side is the data becomes so transparent. So with the press of a button, it gives you all the inputs around. So use of AI in FIDIC contracts. Broadly, if I had to see around contract drafting, I'm dealing with a supplier from US. I'm dealing with a supplier from Europe. I'm dealing with a supplier from Africa. I'm dealing with Indian supplier. So each one has a different type of risk around, depending on the political requirements or whatever. Then I can draft those contracts in the FIDIC with that basis around. Risk assessment. Risk is all about whether it's a geopolitical situation, are the countries location-wise, are the whole supply chain affected around. So risk assessment can also be done. Procurement and vendor management. This one is certainly picking in a big way. So in today's world, any program we do on procurement and vendor management, this has become the very hot topic. How can I cut down my routine work? So routine and repetitive work, we're trying to cut it down and trying to say, guys, move into strategy. So use your energy on the strategic side instead of becoming mechanical functions around. So we are doing quite a lot on that. Project monitoring and management, claims and dispute resolutions, compliance and reportings, predictive analytics. Certainly this can predict a lot. And then documents and workflow automation, enhancing collaboration. If you need any specific one, let me know. I'll be very happy to address it, whether in the evening time or whatever. I'll be very happy to address it, what way we can do it. The benefits, certainly it makes efficiency-wise faster. When contract drafting becomes, it's a complex process, but this could be simplified. Accuracy part, proactive risk management. Certainly when it becomes simpler, then cost savings are there around and transparency. Applicable law, one thing I will touch on it because all of these contracts, one is very clear is what is the applicable law. If the project is in India, what is the applicable law? If the project in other country, what is the applicable law? Vendor will like to force on you, you guys follow my application. So this is where I try to give you some practical steps. Clearly mention the governing law in the contract to avoid ambiguity. Because contract, we have to add all the time what is applicable. Consult legal expert. Ensure compliance with both FIDIC standards and the national law requirements. FIDIC standard is there, but then the national law also we have to see around whether it allows me all those choices around or not. So that way, accordingly, you may have to make some provision change, include local provisions. So FIDIC general conditions to align with mandatory provisions of the national law in a particular condition. 99% the problem may not be there, but in some cases, in some countries, there may be restrictions around. So according to that, you may have to modify the FIDIC standard. Engage with the regulatory authorities around for public project. ensure that the governing law aligns with procurement rules and approvals around. That's what we need to do around. So regulatory authorities have got some requirements, say on sustainability part. FIDIC may not be giving that much details around, then you may have to incorporate that. Now, regulatory authorities, particularly in some countries, they are very particular about their labor, very particular about the staff. So those regulatory requirements, then we have to incorporate. Regulatory will say that you will not buy from this country any raw material. There are some sanctions. So then those also have to be incorporated somewhere. The various type of contracts, again, I don't want to go into too much detail on this. The Red Book is there since 1957. And this was, I'll say, the beginning of this. Beginning was basically the White Book, which came in 1913, but this became very popular. It put too many members into this team around. So Yellow Book is there for design build. And then Silver Book is there for EPC. Green Book for small scale or simple project. 1999, they came around, the Gold Book. You design, build and operate like our highways around. All public procurement partnership around. So Blue Green Book, White Book for consulting services around. Pink Book is only when we want a multilateral development bank, but we have our own requirements on the MDB, the World Bank side. So those have been incorporated and we use them. The Brown Book for subcontracting under the main contract. That's okay. So this is where they are popular for all this around. Well, friend, the learning objectives we have kept around is a contract formation part. What forms a contract? I think many people have been dealing with something. If you ask them the question, what forms a contract? What are the key requirements to form a contract? So understanding the basics of FIDIC contracts. We will walk through all the key clauses around of the mainly red ones, types of FIDIC contracts and selection, parties in FIDIC contract, who are the key parties around, who are the key stakeholders in FIDIC contract, the roles and responsibility of each one, whether it's a contractor, whether it's a subcontractor, whether it's a project manager, whether it's a contract administrator, all those responsibilities around. And then some places project manager may not be there. It's not necessary, it depends on the size of the contract. Risk management, variations and claims, practical tips, use of FIDIC contracts in India and other developing countries around, project implementation and management of FIDIC contract, integrating AI into FIDIC contract management. So broadly, our focus would be learning the role of FIDIC contracts and its uses in projects. So this is what we are doing. And now with this, I give the floor to you guys. Again, welcome to this program. So I want each one of you